Shamaji, independence came to India, but at a very heavy cost. India was partitioned, 1 million people got killed, nearly 15 million were uprooted. Do you think partition was inevitable?
So, I mean, it has happened in other countries, but because ours is such a big country, the scale has never happened. Whereas, say, in Greece and Turkey, there were two divisions, there was language as well as religion. Whereas in India, there was only one factor, it was religion. So, perfectly integrated society like Punjab got ripped into, Bengal got ripped into. So, I don't think they have recovered even now. I think it will take another 50 years.
Do you think that it was the right thing to do?
It depends whose point of view you are looking at it from.
Both the point of views.
No, because it's part of a bigger identity thing. When you see the number of people who were with the Congress, ultimately ended up only the upper caste Hindus. The Harijans were with Baba Ambedkar, and the backward castes, Mahatma Phule thought that having the British was better than having Indian rule because they would be discriminated against. So there were all these people vying for a place in the sun, you know. So the Muslims got caught up in this because the identity of somebody who is a Tamilian and suddenly he's told he's a Pakistani, I mean, it's totally absurd, you know. But people accepted it. I mean, people accept mad ideas and it ruins a whole generation. It took 12 years of Hitler to ruin Germany for 100 years. So from 1906 when the Muslim League was formed until it's hardly 41 years.
So, can we say that basically it is Muslims themselves who were responsible for partition?
A certain sector of the Muslims, which was the landlords, that's why you still have huge landlord holdings in Pakistan. But because it was not a democratic party, unlike the Congress, which by the time Gandhi came had been in existence for almost 40 years. So he built on something, whereas the Congress, the Muslim League was formed by the Aga Khan and people like that. I mean, what kind of standing do they have with the blessings of the British? So it's a very shaky kind of identity. Now they are, according to me, now today's Pakistan, not before partition, is a Punjabi Muslim state, just like Uzbekistan is an Uzbek Muslim state, or Afghanistan is a Pashto Muslim state with minorities. When India is not like that. India has many. There is no, the Hindi walas dominate, but they don't dominate to the same extent that, say, the Punjabis dominate in Pakistan or the Pashtos dominate in Afghanistan.
Can we say that if Jinnah was given a better representation, better deal in leadership, partition would not have taken place?
No, I don't think so, because I think he wanted to become Prime Minister of India, and when that was denied to him, because he didn't agree with Gandhian methods. All the parallel people, if Veer Savarkar had his way, he would have become Prime Minister of India, and Bose would have become Prime Minister of India if his way of thinking had, been the one that came on top. So there were all these various people trying to be the ruler in India, but Jinnah knew he had blown it by the time Gandhi came to dominate.
Was your family in some ways affected by partition?
Well, my father was part of this nationalist Muslim group who started Jamia and all that. So he was very close to Pandit Nehru, and Dr. Zakir Hussain, who was very close to him, was of course with Gandhiji. But we were living in Rampur, so there were no riots in Rampur, because my father locked up all the Muslim League and RSS members and put them in jail. So there was no rioting. But some people burnt all our relatives' houses. So they all had to come and take shelter in our house.
So it must have been very, very traumatic for your family as well.
Yeah, in a way it was. But nothing compared to people who suffered because of partition. And my father brought 30 trucks and buses and rescued everybody from Delhi who belonged to Rampur and took them back in a convoy.
How did your father later on, I mean, he did such a lot of work, see partition as an afterthought?
Well, he from the beginning he thought it was very foolish, and I remember when we were very small, he told us that Bangladesh was going to become separate.
I mean, he
In the
said
50s, in the 50s, he said that.
Remarkable. Shamaji, the after partition, the literature on partition emerged. Stories were written, novels were written in Hindi, and Urdu. There was so much of work, and but cinema, there was a vacuum till. I mean, of course, Chinnamul was there, which was done by Nimai Ghosh in 1951. How do you see literature on partition vis-a-vis cinema?
Well, our cinema has nothing to do with literature, and to begin with. So to expect a partition to be covered when no other aspect of the freedom movement. I mean, on 1857 only now a major film is being made. So no aspect of history has been made properly. I mean, it's a given in the West. There's so many films on historical themes. But all our films, so-called historical films, have been love stories. I mean, like Mughal-e-Azam, it's a fairy tale, It has nothing to do with that period or anything. So this is a foolish question, actually.
But why has that happened? Because we had filmmaker like K. Asif who could have done authentic film because with the grandeur that he created.
No, he because these people all came from a Parsi theatre was what Hindi film has grown out of. And Parsi theatre was never realistic. It was all overblown and rhetoric and so on. Victorian theatre, yeah.
Tell me, how did you contribute? Of course, I know Garam you wrote the screenplay. How did it all start?
Well, actually, I was working on Ek Chadar Maili Si with Bedi Saab. I wanted to do it as a play. So he said, मुझे नाटक वाटक के बारे में कुछ नहीं आता है, तुम मेरे साथ बैठो. So I sat with him and we did the script. So we used to have long sessions during that, and he said, why don't you make a film on the Muslims who didn't go to Pakistan? He said, I can't do it because I'm not an insider, why don't you try? So that struck me, and I talked to Ismat Appa, and she worked on a story which was based on her. That old woman in Garam Hawa is actually a story of her own mother, who went and stayed with a Hindu neighbor and refused to go to Pakistan when her brother and all went. And there are other things from her other stories, Chauthi Ka Joda and all, which she put into the story and made it. And she made the script and then she lost it. And then she started rewriting it, the second version didn't turn out so well. And then she was cleaning her cupboard and she found it again. So then she started doing that. And then when it was completed, I showed it to my father and he said कि ये कहानी तो ठीक है but politics इसके गड़बड़ हैं. तो फिर मैं कैफी साहब से उस वक्त मुलाकात हुई थी क्योंकि मैं गालिब पे एक डॉक्यूमेंट्री बना रही थी. तो कैफी साहब में उसकी मदद कर रहे थे हमारी. And he said कि I'll write it. So he made a lot of changes. He made that shoe factory background and all. Originally we had a government civil servant worked in the railways, but he changed the background. And he said that the kind of women you're showing, very strong women, that's not Awadh. We were setting it in Lucknow. He said put it in Agra because Western UP the women are very strong. So we changed that also. So there are bits of the original story and a lot of things Kaifi Saab added and some things I added, and then it became script.
So it was all done for because Satya Saab wanted to do his first film.
Satya had nothing to do with it. We just did it, and then of course Satya was around, so we wanted him to do it. But it's not because when the script was ready, then he was interested in doing it as a film.
What was the the creative relationship like with you and Satya Saab in Garam Hawa?
Well, he made a lot of contribution to how the script, the format of the script and what would be more cinematic and so on. He did contribute a lot at the script stage itself. As far as the casting was concerned, most of the people were those who had worked with us in the theatre earlier, including Balraji, who was working in theatre with us.
Were there any differences of opinion, or any anecdote which you remember of Garam?
Well, Balrajji was so obsessed with this film that when we went to Agra, he made everybody rehearse like a play for a whole week before we started shooting. And people were getting very annoyed, but he insisted, So everybody knew their lines off because of this. And his own daughter committed suicide in the same way that the girl in the film has. So we were very worried about asking him to do that scene, And Satyu ultimately didn't have to tell him anything because he just reacted. He was scared to say that girl is dead. She said, he didn't even take the name of the character. He said, no, Geeta is lying there, you just look at her. And because he didn't want to remind him of his own daughter who had just done that a few months earlier. So things like that. And then Agra is a very difficult place to shoot. And people didn't allow us to shoot, and they would purposely make a noise or come in front of the camera and all. And all that was handled by Balrajji. And he would have to make promises. Every evening he had to go to a different college or mohalla and make a speech and meet people. That was the price for not having them interfere in the film.
And you think that it was the best work of Balrajji as an actor?
I think it was one of his best roles, because I don't think he was so involved in most films as he was in this one.
As you were also involved in its making, can you tell me which of the sequences or a particular sequence which really touched you, which you recall now, 30 years on? Would you like to say that as an anecdote?
Well, where he was putting the ashes onto the mud onto his daughter's grave, just the expression on his face. And then in the end, when his son decides not to go to Pakistan, that scene also. I think he did that very well.
Shamaji, the way the film ended, which was very, very powerful, very, very moving and very, very symbolical, but I don't think that was the real end. Why did you make that change?
The real end was that his son stays on and he goes. But Balrajji didn't want it to end that way. He wanted to join the procession himself. So he got down. That was his suggestion.
And you, as far as the creativity...
Well, I thought it was more moving that way. It sort of gave it a finish.
How do you look, other films which have emerged after Garam Hawa? Films like Telefilm, although it was made in 35mm, films like Tamas.
Well, Tamas is made on a novel, and that novel had been known for much longer than the film. It was written, I think, in the 70s. And it was based on Vishamji's own experiences. There was a certain cutting edge in the novel which Govind discarded in the film, which I think was better for the film. So the novel exists on its own. But actually, Garam Hawa is not about partition, it's about what happened after partition, whereas Tamas is about partition itself. It's raw, it's much rawer than... Garam Hawa is a reflective film, and this is a very passionate film, Tamas.
Tamas is also a very, very strong film.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the style that Govindji has.
He likes to do that.
So,
yes.
so how do you see it, although it became so popular, how do you see the way he made Tamas?
Well, I thought it was very effective. In fact, I had a very nasty letter that I wrote to, what was his name, the editor of Times of India at that time, one Mr. Jain, because he wanted the film to be banned, you see. And he knew nothing about literature in Hindi and Urdu that had appeared about partition, you see. So, I was, since I had to defend the film, I had to write about it and all that in those days.
Very recently, films like Khamosh Pani, which is...
I haven't seen that film,
Or a general question, Shamaji, like Khamosh Pani and Chitra Nadir Pare, there has been...
Chitra Nadir Pare, I got it. It's a very simplistic kind of film.
But what is your take on these films now emerging, about point of view from Bangladesh, Pakistan? Do you think that it is part of new objectivity coming up? How do you see this?
Yeah, I think so. Because if you read Intezar Hussein's novels, which after Manto I think is the best thing that have been done written on partition. I mean, he takes the idea that that the Muslims were the victims because he himself had to run away to Pakistan, and they don't see that both sides had to suffer as much, and whether it was worth it or not. I think Pakistan has a great identity crisis still.
But that might be our view, your view. But Pakistan, do you think people in Pakistan do think that the making of Pakistan was the correct thing to do?
Well, they haven't any option now because nobody wants them back. I mean, if you were asked tomorrow, do you want Pakistan to join? 99% people in India would say no. So,
there are many people in the West, very, very genuinely, very, very sincerely. I know many, some filmmakers who really feel very, very sad about the whole thing, and they, in fact, even go to the extent of saying that partition should be annulled. Like Satyu Sab thinks that there should be a federation. I mean, do you think that all these things are worth giving a thought?
well, I'm not sure about India itself, you see. So, I don't know whether we can have any more people. I mean, I think the different parts of India should be given more autonomy, for instance. And this whole idea, this whole big brother attitude we have towards Nepal and Sri Lanka and all the other countries, and Delhi has towards the other states, I don't think it's such a great thing. So, I wouldn't like other people to have to suffer the whole thing. I don't think we are a very ideal democracy as yet. We're still groping.
I mean, as far as Hindu-Muslim relations are concerned, it has gone through many phases. I mean, it has got its highs and lows, very, very violent times, very nice times. Given at this point of time, how do you look into the future, and how do you see the whole thing?
Well, I think fundamentalism is going to grow because it is a reaction to westernization. But you don't, for a lot of Muslim fundamentalists, the West is the enemy, and for Hindu fundamentalists, Muslims are the enemy. You need an enemy.
Do you think it is justified?
For people who believe in it, it's justified. You need an enemy because to feel good, you need somebody to be worse than you are.
But don't you think it's very divisive if we take it as a country, India as a country?
Well, if it's going to be divisive, then so be it. Let us get divided.
You think that can be a
I don't think it really makes difference. I think nationalism is a highly overrated aspect of life.
Why?
False feelings and hysteria and wrapping yourself in the flag. I mean, we don't get a medal in the Olympics, and it's such a tragedy. But we're not sporting people, so how can we win in the Olympics? We don't make good films. We're still stuck in the age of, overblown theatrics. How can we make cinematic films? रोइए आप बैठ के कब तक?
जो गदर या पिंजर जैसी फिल्में हैं, जैसे गदर एक फिल्म है जो कि which is a blockbuster, it became such a big hit. But I mean, how do you see it as a film?
Well, I think it's a completely reactionary film. The original story, it was made in Punjabi, it was very touching. It was based on a true story, but if you can take any story, even Pinjar has got the same. Now, any film that's made in Partition is made from the point of view of Hindu fundamentalism. So, that is Gadar is a Hindu fundamentalist view of Partition, and so is Pinjar.
So do you buy the argument that Pinjar also is a kind of an anti-Muslim film?
Oh yes, definitely.
But he thinks that it's based on Amrita Pritam's novel and it's a very sincere film.
Well, his film, the novel might not be, but he has got a background like that. He is an RSS member. How can he be an objective person?
How do you, this is my last question, how do you look back 32 years on after being a part and parcel of the creative team of Garam Hawa?
Well, it was, I don't know if Satyu told you, but it was held up in the census for 1 year because Mrs. Gandhi wanted the UP elections to be held before the film was released. So it was, for some excuse or the other, it was not given a census certificate. Everywhere it was released, there were huge police in front of cinemas. And when you see it now, you wonder why, all that happened.
No, he didn't tell me. That's a very good, valid point. I mean, if you see Garam Hawa today, it doesn't look dated. It looks like a new film, a very, very, revealing, very understated, nice film. Do you think that if you were all doing it for the first time now, at this point of time, would you have done it in a different way?
No, one has become much more cynical since then.
Can you expand that? Would you have done
Well,
it?
I mean, in those days, I thought, that partition was really a bad thing and there were good guys and bad guys. But I think most of us have mostly bad and a little bit of good in us.
Are you disillusioned?
No, I'm disillusioned. I think most human beings are not good to begin with. I mean, once I talked to Satyajit Ray and I said, what is your secret? He said, my secret is I like people. Most people don't.
You think he must be lying?
No, I don't think so. He really liked people and that's why he saw most people as good.
Shamaji, you have been such a I can say celebrity screenplay writer. You've been so long with Shyam Benegal. Have you never thought of directing a film yourself?
I did, but I got a even okay from the NFDC, but they wanted stars, which I didn't want to take. So
when was it?
What, 15 years ago.
And what was the film?
It was another novel by Ismat Chugtai. It was a man-woman question kind of film.
So why didn't you try again?
No, I got fed up because it was too much. I mean, unless one gets a producer and all that, which doesn't happen. There's too much trouble here to get finance and so on.
Just would like to end, if you want to say any best anecdote or any best thing that you remember of Garam Hawa, which you cherish, the memory of which you cherish, making of the film, some fight, some argument, anything, which comes to your mind just now.
No, not really, because I've told you about Balraji's. Well, one very funny thing was when we were shooting in the market and everybody came and they stood in front of the camera and they wouldn't let. And then how, we had to reduce the thing to be in total close-up so that the other people, they refused to move from in front of their shops. So you had to sort of ad-lib something at the moment then, so things like that. That was quite interesting. The other thing, you could have just run away, but then you would have lost that. The other funny thing that happened was that the original role of the grandmother was to be done by Begum Akhtar. And she didn't arrive. So we phoned her up and she says, "Beta, you come and you persuade him, he's not letting me come." So Satyu said, "You go there, you'll have to at least stay for 2 days to convince her husband, then you'll come, we'll waste 4 days of shooting." So then the person in whose house we were shooting, he did a small role also. He said, "My father had a mistress who was in Alamara in the chorus, and then she came back to Agra and she got married. I will ask her." She hadn't acted since Alamara, you can imagine, for more than 40 years. And she agreed and she did that role of the old lady. So that was an interesting thing that happened. I wonder how Begum Akhtar would have been in that role.
Brilliant, Shamaji. Thank you very much.